The case against Aldrick Scott will now move to district court. A Douglas County judge made that decision this morning.
This after an hour's worth of testimony from one of the lead investigators. As our Brian Mastery reports, some of Carrie Allen's family and friends came to court to hear it for themselves.
Aldrick Scott stayed silent for his preliminary hearing on murder charges. At one point, his public defender asked the sheriff investigator if there was any evidence on the phone seized from Aldrick Scott. Remember, he was arrested in the Central American country of Belize nearly 2 months ago. The deputy told the court about Scott's search history on his phone.
Mr. Scott was looking at whether he could be arrested in Belize, whether police could confront him in Belize. He was searching Carrie Allen. I believe he was searching himself.
Aldrick Scott, a man who spent 20 years in the military and was living in Topeka, Kansas, had dated Carrie Allen for about a year, according to friends. Investigators say she ended the relationship 2 weeks before her death. The deputy told the court that according to cameras at the bar where she had drinks with another man that night, along with security cameras in her neighborhood, Aldrick Scott's cell phone location data, his vehicle GPS coordinates, he was not only following Carrie Allen, but waiting inside her home for her. Investigators also noticed this.
Was there a distinguishing mark or something on that vehicle also that you could?
There was. So when we recovered Aldrick Scott's vehicle, there is a silver Superman decal that would have been an aftermarket decal that's affixed to his driver's door. In the video at the Good Life, we were able to see a silver glint that originated from the exact same area that the silver decal was affixed to his door.
Investigators allege Aldrick Scott shot her in the chest, the bullet traveling through 2 walls in her bedroom door. Investigators later noticed the walls had been patched. Detectives say Scott then wrapped her in combat bandages to, they assume, prevent blood from leaking, as well as trash bags as he moved her to his vehicle, only to bury her near an abandoned farmhouse in Topeka, Kansas. Deputies say they only knew to look here because Aldrick Scott's OnStar system in his SUV indicated he spent more than an hour in this remote location.
We have an Aldrick Scott on the line saying that he signal 37 to his girlfriend.
And remember the odd third-party 911 call that came in from Texas to the Topeka Police Department?
It was a sheriff's deputy in Coryell County, Texas. He had received information from a friend of his who said that she had spoken with Aldrick Scott previously in the day, and he had confessed to her that he had killed his girlfriend.
On your side, from the Douglas County Courthouse, Brian Mastery, 6 News.
Carrie Allen's laptop, phone, and trunk liner have not been recovered. Investigators believe Aldrick Scott tossed it into a dumpster.